Hey, what's going on? This is Rocha, and I'm today's guest for Gear Focus. I am a freelance DP located in the San Francisco Bay Area. And in today's video, I want to talk about these three cameras. I want to talk to you about how I use it in my work, in my video production world. I do a lot of corporate commercials and documentaries. So depending on the type of work I'm doing, I might choose a camera over another one. Some are really good at certain things, but not so great at others. And I'll explain my thought process before deciding what camera I want to shoot in. So the freelance work I do, often I work with agencies who want to shoot with a particular camera. They know what they want in mind. And so it helps to already own that camera because then you don't have to rent it out. And personally, I just don't like doing that. Even if they're shipping out the camera to me, you have to put the camera together. That takes time. Or let's say I'm picking it up from somebody, I have to drive out there. That's hours out of my time that I'm not getting paid for, and it can become quite a hassle. Also, let's say after we wrap and the camera needs to be returned that same day. If I am taking on that responsibility, I'm often having to back up the footage that day after the shoot because I need to return that camera the same day. That often has happened to me. So I prefer to own my cameras. This is why I bought them. These were cameras that I was getting requests for, so I decided why not own them? I can rent them and eventually pay them off. So first of all, let's start with the red Komodo. This became very popular. I know I hear a lot of people say that the red is overhyped, and people get very emotional over cameras. Certain manufacturers, they love red or they don't like red. I think it's good. This camera is good for commercial work. I have plenty of buddies who own this and they use it for commercials. I think that's the intended purpose of it because that 6K raw footage is awesome. But for long form content, like let's say documentaries, depending on the client, it might be overkill. These files are huge, Another thing I hear from other people that own Reds is that most of the time they're shooting ProRes because they need a quick turnaround. This shoots ProRes 4K, which is great for those type of projects where you just want to shoot something fast, but it kind of defeats the purpose of the 6K Red RAW, the codec. You can also shoot 4K Red RAW, the Red RAW codec, but then you're cropping it into the sensor every time you downscale. If you're, let's say, wanting to shoot above 40 frames per second, you need to downscale to 5K and 4K to get the higher frame rates, but you're cropping it into the sensor, which is something I don't like about the Reds. Also, if you're, again, for long form content, let's say interviews, which is the type of work I'm doing a lot. So this also informs what I look for in a camera. For those kind of content, for interviews, you can't record audio internally, which is a major drawback. Sometimes you need to record audio internally if you don't have an audio person, or even if you do, sometimes the clients just want the audio in. So the preamps on this is not very good. You only want to use the audio as a reference. Even though the Komodo has an RF mount, you can also adapt EF mount lenses, which is what I do often. And even the 24-70 Mark II, the EF mount, has a pretty good autofocus. It works pretty good. I've done that on a gimbal and I've had really good results with running autofocus. If you use RF lenses, I'm pretty sure you can even get better autofocus to work. Other than that, it's a great little camera. I mean, you can rig it up on cars. I have buddies who do that and they love this camera for that reason, for commercials. I've been hired on shoots because I have the red and they want to shoot with the red. So yeah, there's definitely a hype, but it's not all bad about it. There's great things about this camera. The resolution is awesome, 6K. The color science is great. If you are going to shoot 6K raw, just make sure that the editor or yourself, you have a hefty computer that can take on that footage. I've experienced that. I don't have the beefiest computer, so yeah, I can create proxies, but when I'm wanting to export and I have a huge color grade, either DaVinci Resolve or Final Cut, it crashes on me because upon export, that's where it crashes, right? So I almost never use this for my YouTube channel because it's just overkill. You can throw this on a gimbal, which is also great for that kind of work. When you're doing commercials, you don't need a big Movi or a big, the Ronin R2. You can throw this on a Crane 3S or the Ronin RS2, small gimbals, and still get incredible footage. So again, this is great, I would say, for commercials or if you want to impress people because yeah, there's definitely a lot of hype for this camera. But again, that, you know, there's also amazing things, and I understand why people love the red. All right, moving on to our next camera, the URSA Mini Pro G2. I actually bought this on Gear Focus used. I got a good deal on it. I was looking at this camera for a long time because I had the Blackmagic Pocket 4 case. Actually, I still own them. It's what I'm shooting in right now. And I wanted a good A cam for the B cam, you know? And so I decided, I was looking at footage from the Blackmagic, the URSA, and it matches up great with the 4K. And I just love the Blackmagic colors. It's one of my favorites. When I ever get to the color grade, it doesn't take a lot of massaging of the colors to get it to a good spot. So also another thing about the Blackmagic, it has the best menu system out of almost any manufacturer. I think once you start using the menu system, it's very easy to click around and select the exact settings you want. I wish more manufacturers would learn from the user interface that comes with Blackmagic, so it's great. The codecs, it offers Blackmagic RAW and also ProRes. I often use ProRes when I'm dealing with certain clients that maybe are editing Final Cut. That way they don't have to transcode. But if you're using Premiere or DaVinci Resolve, you can take in B-RAW footage straight in, no problem. It has EF mount. What I don't like is that the URSA does not have great autofocus. It's all manual focus. Not a huge deal for a lot of you, but sometimes I'm working with certain clients or projects where we require to move fast, and having to worry about the focus, especially if we're doing interviews where it's like 1.8 or 2, and the subject is moving back and forth, you need to baby the focus to make sure they stay in focus. But if you have autofocus, if you had it, you know, you don't have to worry about that. You can worry about other things, especially if it's a minimal crew. So those are the things that I think about. It has 2 XLRs. Often, you know, like I said, for interviews, I do a lot of those. We get a boom into the camera and also a lab. If there's no dedicated audio person, even if there is, we always try to get the audio in. Overall, it's a great camera. I would say that where I see it more requested is for indie work, indie filmmaking, movies. But it's not a highly requested camera. I've been asked for this camera here and there, but not as much as these 2 other cameras. I mean, I wish people would ask for this camera in particular more, because I really like working with it. The only thing though is that every time I work with audio people, they can't get the time code to work, you know, and we looked on forums, and it seems this is a problem with the URSA G2. I don't know if this is a global problem with all the URSA G2s, but I know on this one that it doesn't work. It doesn't sync with whatever the audio person has. So that becomes a problem if you're doing documentaries where you're constantly hitting stop and go and you have an audio person. That might become a big problem, and you might want to stay away from that. So you gotta research whether that's a problem that, you know, that happens quite a bit with all the URSAs. I don't know. I have to, you know, I just haven't found a clear answer. But if you're just doing interviews, often slating is fine and you can go. And for me, that's why I've still kept it. You know, it's just mostly interviews, and it's really good for that. Now, moving on to the Sony FX9, I bought this at the end of last year because I was getting a lot of requests for this camera. There were, you know, agencies that constantly asking me if I could shoot with the Sony FX9. I'm like, I don't have it. Can we shoot with the URSA G2? It does the same thing. It has XLR inputs. It has great colors, and they're like, okay, fine. But eventually there were some productions where they're like, no, we need to shoot with the FX9, so we're gonna rent it from a rental house, or you figure out the rental or something like that. And it was always a hassle to having to go pick up the camera and then return it. And then, so I always prefer, like I said, I always prefer to buy them, especially if I'm seeing that I'm getting a lot of requests for it. So I ended up buying it. I got away from the Sony E mounts. All my lenses are EF mount, as you see here. This is the red Komodo is actually RF, but I have an adapter to EF mount. So I wasn't excited about getting into the E mount, but the autofocus is amazing on the Sony FX9, which is great for run and gun shoots where you're shooting shallow depth of field for interview. You don't have to baby the focus. You can trust the autofocus. Great for that type of work. This camera is lighter than the URSA G2, which is what I like. You can put a battery internally. The URSA, you put a big V mount, which is great, but then you can power the monitor. I usually put a monitor on top. This comes with the viewfinder, but then again, it's not a fair comparison because this is like a $12,000 camera, $11,000, whereas this is like a $6,000 package. So it's really hard to like do apples to apples. It's not quite the same camera. If the production is asking for proxies, this one can record the proxies internally. I believe the highest is 1280 by 720. I've been asked for those plenty of times, and I have to upload them right away the same day because they want to get started on the edit. The resolution is great. Also, the color science has improved. I used to have the FS7. I sold it on Gear Focus actually, and then with that money I bought the URSA. But the color science now on this one, it has S-Cinetone, and just even the S-Log3, once you color grade it, it just looks much better. I mean, I really like this camera. It's a full frame sensor as well, so you get that with this camera. I mean, there's a lot of great things about it. I think, you know, if I was doing documentary, I would probably go with the FX9 because I know that the time code will work. There's no issues with that. It's a little bit lighter, and it's just, you know, for documentaries, this is probably one of the cameras that gets requested the most. So as a, you know, as a business choice, it's probably, you know, this is probably better, even though it costs more money. You might get more rentals out of it. As far as the color science, I think just the Blackmagic to me is better. This one is more for commercial work. So I think that's how I would categorize this camera. This is more for commercial work. If you're gonna shoot 6K red raw, definitely. This is more, I've seen it more with indie filmmakers. You can also use it for documentaries. I've used it for documentaries. And also to record these YouTube videos. I often shoot ProRes with this camera. And this one, yeah, definitely documentary, corporate work. All these cameras are great. It's really hard to complain about any of these cameras because they do the job, what they're intended to do beautifully. You know, it all depends on the type of work you're doing. I don't think any one camera is superior over another. It depends what the client wants, what they expect. Some clients want red, and that's what they want. Heck, it's nice to have that and give it to them, right? But it's not necessarily something that the Red Komodo specifically is not intended for. I wouldn't say it's intended for long-form documentaries unless the client really wants that and they're okay with handling those huge file sizes. Then yeah, but totally, you can definitely roll with this camera. I've done that. We've done this as a B cam, you know. So let me know what you guys think. I'm always curious. I mean, this is just my opinion. If you want to learn more about stuff I do, you can check me out here on my YouTube channel. As always, thank you for watching, and we'll see you around.